we should go ahead and get started. And there's one item on the agenda that I forgot to put on there, which is election of the chair.
Yeah, we need to pick the chair, guys.
All right, we're recording.
I guess two fingers got pointed at you first. Congratulations, Scott.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
You didn't do any discussion, but that's okay.
Yeah, what did we learn last night?
So, it's the Public Land Use Committee meeting of Wednesday, February 17th, 7:30 in the morning. And the committee has just voted to elect Scott Diener as chair.
All right. All right, so then as chair, I guess, are we happy with this time? I know this first meeting is usually to nail down these times, right?
Yeah, as far as my calendar, it's just a crapshoot. So, this is when you want to do it. It's work for you.
I'm a crapshoot too.
Yeah, I know that we have scheduling challenges sometimes, and so 7:30 in the morning after a council meeting is not necessarily the best, but it's something that's been accommodated.
Finance or Monday? What is it, 29th?
Sure.
That's right.
I'm okay with this time.
Okay, so what are we, the second Wednesday, or is this the third Wednesday?
This should probably be the third.
This is the third.
Third. All right, so keep rolling with this time.
Yeah.
Okay, third Wednesday at 7:30.
Uh-huh.
Hello.
And before we get into the agenda, my other question for the committee, since this is an entirely new committee and membership, is your preference for minutes. As we learned last night, summary minutes that are just state the action that was taken are recommended. That certainly makes our lives a lot easier if that's acceptable.
I'm all about that. These are recorded. Are these uploaded to the
Yes.
city website? I'm all about action minutes. I think that's the way to go.
Okay? Excellent.
Who prepares minutes?
It's going to be, yeah, it's going to be one of the planners who staffs the meetings, either Elle or Carrie, but she's on her honeymoon this week, so she's not.
Congratulations to her.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she's gonna take the minutes there that she got married.
And she's going to take action minutes.
Oh,
Action minutes.
Yes, please.
Any other business items before we get started? All right, item one.
The parking meters downtown, this kind of, I'll give you some information on where we're at. Obviously, I put in the budget this year that we have 2 parking meters downtown on the waterfront. There's a couple of issues with those. They're starting to get out of date, starting to break down. And the other issue is the term of parking that we're allowing people to buy at those meters, which currently is hourly, daily, and monthly. And the monthly parking thing really doesn't work out very well because the stubs that come out of the machines wash out after a period of time, and it becomes impossible to read how long, those had been issued before. They said that Parkion had said that, to their knowledge, they don't have anybody else that tries to do a monthly parking with these type of things. And actually, I think from looking at it from the police department and the parking enforcement perspective, I think it should be hourly, daily, and weekly. I think that's probably the best way to have that. That'll have to be addressed when we redo the machines this year, which I have in my budget to do. Basically, they need to be completely rebuilt, but once again, I put that in my budget, and we're going to accomplish that. We need to piggyback on another job that Parkion from New Jersey, who owns the machines or who builds these machines, they're going to come out here on another job and package our job with them. That's how I got us a good guy deal on the price. So that's going to happen this year. But when that happens, we're going to want to move forward. It'd be my recommendation to take away the monthly parking out of the machine and go to weekly parking.
Chief, when's the timeline on, do you roughly?
Don't know. I can check with them again, but they needed to find another job that they were gonna do out here. Which brings me to the other point is, we've had some issues with these machines because they have been there for, I'm not sure, 5-6 years or so, I think. And even though they're mostly electronic, they're like a big computer, there are some mechanical features like the push button thing on the front. Unfortunately, last week, we had one machine go down, and Melinda and I went down and tried to see if we could get it back up, and by the time we were done, the other machine had quit working. So we were without either parking machine, which is the first time that's happened since I've been here. So we were without, and we had to order parts. So their parts were coming from New Jersey, and we put a rush on it. It took 3 days to get the parts. I was able to get the first machine back up and running Tuesday morning, and then by Tuesday afternoon, which was yesterday, I went back down there because I got some more parts in. I spent a couple hours on the last machine. I had to put the new button mechanism in the front, which was a little trickier than I thought, but
So you're having to do your own,
I'm doing my own maintenance, yeah.
that seems a bit.
It's a lot cheaper than having the contractors come over. And most of it actually is it's pretty easy for Melinda to do. She, like I said, if you understand how to work on the insides of a computer, she can do just like the tech does, call Parkion, and they'll walk her through the stuff. A lot of it's just function check stuff. So anyhow, the good news is both parking machines are up and running. The bad news is they do have inherent problems. Part of it is, I think they're 2G, and 2G's going out, and eventually they won't be able to talk, and if they don't talk, we're not going to get credit card information, which means we don't get any funds, which is the big reason I'm rebuilding them this year. But I don't anticipate any major catastrophic thing at this point. I think the parking meters have been brought up to the level that they're going to function, and we're able to maintain them until we get this total rebuild. But the main thing I really want to stress is I think that once this total rebuild is coming, we're going to have to move fairly quickly to address what term of parking we actually want to sell to the public. And like I said, my recommendation is to drop off the monthly and just drop it back down to a weekly. And that actually solves some other problems that people are having with paying for parking down there, going to a shorter term. And anybody have any questions?
I guess I would ask the monthly parking.
Well, my only comment there is, the one problem with the assumption that you're guaranteed a parking spot, I think we could do a better job describing that it's first come, first serve. And so I think we'd eliminate that. But what I see down there is they're all commuters. I bet I don't know what your percentage is, but your percentage of monthly parking passes have got to be huge.
It is high. I don't have those numbers, but
So,
without a doubt.
Are we hurting those that are using that service? I don't know, just to throw it out there.
Charge the same price as a monthly, but break it into 4 segments.
It's just a hassle, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if
it
you're
is.
just doing it 4 times a month versus running your card once a month. Or do they come here to buy a parking pass once a month?
Well,
Or
when we originally put the monthly parking pass in, that's what we did. You came here and you bought a pass, and it was a large, brightly colored.
yeah, 'cause I do agree with the type of ticket that it's what's that called? The heat.
Thermal paper.
Yeah, thermal paper, and so you get sun beat through your windshield, and the thing turns black, and you can't read it after 2 weeks.
The parking situation is going to go with the economy. And, we've had a down economy. And in the last few years, we really haven't had a parking problem down there. 3 years ago, there were quite a few spaces all day long. And now it's more hit and miss. It's not like I'm seeing that lot fill up right away and there's no spaces available.
Right.
So,
Well, the challenge is that for those who aren't commuting, need a space at a certain hour, and,
right.
if you get down there and there isn't a space available,
We're not having that issue.
Yeah, only when their boats are down and you got traffic coming from.
It'd have to be something
Minneapolis,
extraordinary
right.
to cause a problem. But right now, the people, if you bought a monthly pass and you get down there in the morning, you're gonna have a place to park.
Well, that was the original idea, was that we were reserving, if we sold 10 monthly passes, we reserved 10 spaces up until a certain hour. And, you know, that way they were somewhat assured a parking spot, and then after that hour, it was free game, it was open to anyone.
Well, I know we've had preliminary discussions, but I think ideally we would all like to see that parking not be on the waterfront and find a park and ride location somewhere else and have Kitsap Transit pick commuters up and drop them down to that boat and eliminate all those vehicles not on our waterfront, but that's another discussion.
Yeah, that's a long-term fix. The short term is you've got people that are paying for a guaranteed spot that aren't getting it, and so you either maintain the program or get rid of the program.
Well, there are no guaranteed spots.
That's what I'm saying. But, well, what I'm saying is if you buy a monthly pass, there's this assumption that that's a guarantee.
And I think if you drop it down to a weekly thing, it helps alleviate some of that perception.
Would it, what about, so I understand the limitations of the machines and that I support that idea of going to the weekly there. But we used to issue from the clerk's office a monthly pass. Do we want to go back to the placard that, you know, if you truly want a monthly pass and we're, you know, we've got 10 spots for, you know, and that are potentially numbered and you're getting
But you wouldn't need 10, you'd need 70.
Yeah, they used to do that, and the finance department handles the downtown parking, but, yeah, and I know that they do it for the merchants, still, for the merchants.
Yeah, they still do the merchant
Yeah.
spots, and there's still some merchant parking over on the west end. And what they did with the monthly pass people is there was a sign, they used to be down in front of the Marina office before we switched, that went away, that basically said it's, you know, permit parking from 4 a.m. to
10 a.m. or
9 a.m. or something like that, and after that, it's just free. But even that, and it's still an enforcement issue to some degree. So,
Randy, do you know how many monthly parking things they sell usually?
I do not know.
It's a high percentage.
Right, it's a high
It really is a high percentage. I suppose, you know, if you wanted to convert the lot to a, you know, we're gonna rent you a spot, I mean, I just don't think that's good for the downtown businesses, to tell you
can
the
I
truth.
bring up that? So when I worked in Bremerton, I did a lot of work with Diamond Parking. I used to work with the guy over there, and they'd take lots and they would just convert them. And at Art Anderson Associates, you know, they would buy for employees these Diamond monthly placards, and you had a spot. Yeah, this is just kind of like rainbow thinking, but why are we even in the parking business? Why don't we have Diamond come in and say, look, manage our parking for us for a while, you know, until we deal with the long-range solution? Why are we're spending a lot of time, and most cities don't run parking lots. So I'm just trying to do some rainbow thinking here, is maybe we'd be better off to hand this off to a parking company that wants to manage it, and they have the ability to say, okay, if you want a monthly parking pass, then we're gonna establish and sign so many stalls that are numbered, and for the day user, they just use it. I mean, why are we breaking our pick on this?
You want to look into that?
But you've got, yeah.
I mean, we can do enforcement, or they can do enforcement.
You'd want to
Well-
look at the budget ramifications, because I remember reading that budget, a pretty big number that the city's bringing in on those fees.
$260 a week.
If somebody took away the parking machines out of my budget and took away the responsibility of managing the parking machines, I wouldn't cry about it. Let's just put it that way.
We're still doing parking on the street, but we just leave the lot to a company that does parking lots.
Have we already signed a contract on the new machines?
They have work orders pending to improve those machines. Yeah.
I'm not saying Diamond wouldn't utilize those, or they may go to the pay box now, you know, I don't know what I know in Seattle, Diamond uses the electronic ones. In Bremerton, I think they still use the box, so, I don't know. I think the guy I used to deal with is still there.
Well, it wouldn't hurt to call and figure out
Reach
what
out.
that program looks like.
See what their profit margin is on that.
He's a logical person. Somebody
Great
said they had
idea,
a-
Mark. Give them a call, let us know.
Somebody said they had a
Let you know.
contact.
No, I'll call him. I'm just trying to determine, so what are we gonna do in the meantime though? Just status quo?
I'm gonna keep those machines running until Parkion says they can come out and rebuild them, and then I'm gonna get them rebuilt.
And
And that's
then-
what I have the plans to do.
Then on the monthly pass, if somebody had paid for a monthly pass and there's not a space, we're just gonna deal with those on a case by case in the meantime?
I recommend not having monthly passes. That was my recommendation.
Or taking them to a weekly, but
Well,
that,
even if you put something on the machine that just some sort of a decal that says, you know, buying a monthly pass or even a weekly pass, right? Someone could make the same assumption. Look, I bought parking for a week and I can't have nowhere to park. I mean, I don't know if that goes away. Maybe we just need to have some sort of a disclaimer on there that says,
You know, one of the biggest complaints that police departments get are about some of the most minor issues, and parking would fit in there. I don't ever recall anybody ever calling me and saying, hey, I paid for a monthly pass down here and I don't have a place to park. And believe me, if that happened, I would think that people would call because that's what they call about. And so I don't, you know, we keep talking about, you know, having a space for somebody. Personally, from working here and seeing the waterfront, I haven't seen that problem. So unless people start, I mean, I would guess they'd come to the city council meeting, you know? I mean, honestly, I haven't had a single citizen call and say, I paid for a monthly pass, I don't have a place to park, what are you gonna do for me?
I think Sean's hearing it, he's hearing it a bit, he commutes with that group. And I've heard
happened
it.
to be when I first did it
I've
the
heard
first
it
time. I
from
was like, this
friends
is
too.
weird.
Once again, there are times,
Yes,
but
it is.
overall, if you look at the parking available down there,
Yeah.
there's parking available.
I
It's
totally
isolated
agree.
instances.
Totally agree. Totally
well, I thought that was what prompted this even coming up.
No.
was There was an issue, so.
But if Public Works would like to take over the
No.
parking machines, I'd be more than
No,
happy to
Public
turn
Works-
them over to him.
That's not what I'm saying.
So I'm gonna persevere. I'll let this committee know when Parkion is planning on coming out and doing those upgrades. They're gonna be good upgrades for the city. They're gonna have color screens. The screens are a lot better. I'm actually gonna subscribe to something that's called City News, where we can actually put something, you hit a certain button on the machine, it'll bring up City News. In case there's something that we wanna put out there. It's just a huge upgrade, and it's not really that big of a cost. So I'm looking forward to that, and I think that if we can get the monthly thing out of the system and go to a weekly, after balancing everything out in my head, I see that as a really logical thing to do to solve some of these issues.
So I did hear a good point. So can we put some sort of a disclaimer on the machine that says, long-term spaces are on a first-come, first-served basis? Have some sort of.
You just say all parking is based on first come, first served.
Yeah. I'm sure the lot's full, it's full. And then just kinda
I would
inside.
challenge us to keep the monthly thing top of mind, because it doesn't change enforcement. If you have a weekly pass or a monthly pass, you're still driving through and having to check tickets. The only issue here is the thermal paper, right?
Yep.
And do they have other option? for
No,
thermal paper?
they
That's
don't.
it?
That's
Do we
it.
give any kind of a discount for a monthly? Is it just,
I think there is a small
It's
discount.
$90 a month.
Yeah, it's a small discount.
$5
I mean, each increment you go up, there's a small discount.
Rack rate's $5 a day, right?
Yep.
So the rates need to be set before we do the machines and figure out where we're at, so. But I'll bring that back as soon as I know
There's not really a savings there.
Yeah.
when we're moving forward.
So I heard the committee recommending Public Works contact Diamond Parking about the possibility of managing the parking lot and then also putting a disclaimer on the machine.
Right, so in the interim, we're just business as usual, other than the disclaimer, and I'm just gonna be doing this side conversation.
Keep this agenda item for next month.
Yeah, I think the committee needs to think about where they want to go, and I'm more than willing to move any direction, so.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks for your time.
Item number 2. Street vacation of 1350 Bay Street.
These are kind, and I only have one for you, sorry. I think this has kind of evolved since it's been on the agenda, so first one, which is West Avenue and Division, which is the map that I handed out. So the one in blue, the person actually owned, this is Prentice and Stewart. They own both of the parcels in blue, and they want to vacate. This might be easier. And then the second map might be a little bit easier too. So this property right here is all one property. They own that, and then they also own this here. They want to vacate this parcel here. There. They want to vacate all of that, and then they own this parcel here, and they want to vacate this parcel here. Obviously, they were trying to clear up some things that were happening here. There's a garage that's kind of in the right of way and in the neighbor's property that they're trying to fix up. That's not going to resolve their immediate issue, but they do want to vacate those portions. I had Public Works Director, which is the third page.
They only get half of the.
Yeah, they only get half.
The other half, right?
I'm looking into seeing if the property owner signs, which I think if they sign off a certain document that says they're not interested, then they can potentially do the whole vacation at once, but we're still looking into that part of it.
They've got two options. They can either, the Stewarts can either offer to purchase the other half from that party, or
Through a civil matter.
the other person can waive their right, which
Right.
would be
So
silly.
is this one of the street right-of-ways that was platted prior to incorporation?
It
of the
is
city?
not. Oh,
It's
excuse
Yeah,
me,
it
this
is.
one is yes.
So,
Yes.
my understanding of the law there is that the right-of-way has already been vacated, and we're just formalizing that, but that would mean that the adjacent property already owns half of the property and would have to
Right.
be sold
Right, quit claim.
from one neighbor to another.
Yeah, they have to quit.
Okay, so we would be able to encompass that all together.
No.
Perfect, okay, that's good.
I guess my biggest issue on this is, and we responded back to the applicants on, we do have utilities through there, and it's their burden to survey the location of the water and the sewer lines, have the easements prepared, have them recorded, because we've got sewer and water in there, so.
Yeah, this was kind of evolving as the agenda was being prepared, so I think we're still at a holding pattern, but just want to bring it to your guys' attention that this is something that's going to be coming
So
back before you or to the council.
So if there is utilities, or if there are utilities in the right-of-way, there is not an unopened right-of-way, and therefore they would have to
Okay.
compensate the city, is my understanding, but
Question for the attorney.
Okay, so
There's
that's,
no public works reason other than utilities.
Right.
We aren't ever gonna open that street.
There's no need for that other than to maintain our utility.
and then the second one has evolved from a street vacation to purchasing city property. So, let's see what I have, a little teeny tiny map. So the parcel outlined in red is the owner of the property's one vacation. The two little tiny blue highlighted parts are city parcels. And they originally wanted to vacate that front end parcel of the city to the owner's property. They wanted to vacate that, but then they're wanting to purchase another property, so they said, hey, well, if we can get that, we want to also buy the two cities parcels. So that's what they want to do. They want to buy those two.
Right, so this should, from a planning perspective, follow this, should be under the same criteria that Nick just mentioned, other than the parcel that the city received somehow. I'm not sure how we ended up with those parcels up behind the Body Works. There was an unopened alleyway, but then there's an actual 1902 lot or something, or 1889 lot that is immediately behind Body Works. So that's the parcel there I think they're wanting to buy.
We wanna get rid of that. That's
Yeah.
a steep slope and it slides right there, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's where they had the slide. So, well, the slide was actually above on the properties that come off of Mitchell and that slid onto the city property. So, yeah, there's no interest or need on the city's behalf. It's just a matter of again, have, going through the right channels. I know that the guy that wants to buy this is looking at developing a hillside, which would be a benefit to the city, because they'll be building a wall and having wall drainage and taking care of, we had a tree come down a couple weeks ago that fell on the hillside, and because of this, the tree almost just went out into Bethel. So that development will benefit the city definitely, indirectly. So anything that we can do to support what they're trying to do, I'm all for that.
So is it correct to call this a vacate if it's a parcel?
No, it's probably gonna be.
Well,
It
there's,
needs to be surplus, right?
right, the property needs to be, the one parcel needs to be surplused, and then it's still a vacation though, but depending on the timeline, and we're having Olson verify that, depending on the timeline, they may already have ownership.
And they've already given us a $1,900 check for the vacation when it originally came in along with appraisal. So now we're just gonna hold that until they determine what they're gonna do, purchase the two properties or give us an appraisal.
So what are we doing with these two?
Nothing, just an update.
Okay,
Just-
so
It's coming
no
down
action
the pipes.
necessary.
Correct.
Yeah, I think we need to, I don't know, maybe on that language, Nick, that you found on the timeline.
I have that.
You have that?
Carol incorporated into the code.
Okay, so when somebody comes in for a vacation, who's,
It's on them to prove that it was platted. They have to provide a map.
okay, so it's on the onus of the applicant to,
Francis provided, but Ross did not. Carol was whatever.
yeah, it seems there needs to be like a if-then-do loop where you get that decision matrix and whether it's actual vacation by the city or the people actually own it.
And it seems to me on the one that involves a parcel, where we have to sell the parcel in order for them to petition for the right-of-way adjacent to that parcel to be vacated, because otherwise we'd have to initiate the petition to
Right.
vacate it.
Yeah, if they're wanting that parcel and then there's a half right-of-way associated with that.
It's 2 steps.
Yeah.
They buy the land and then they request the vacation.
Okay.
And then see what it comes out.
Draft parks element for the comp plan update.
Yeah, so we wanted to share this with the Land Use Committee. This was vetted through the Planning Commission at their last meeting, February 3rd. They reviewed the document, requested 3 minor updates to it, and we have a public hearing scheduled at the first meeting of the Planning Commission here in March, the only meeting in March so far. The 3 recommendations that they had made, which are incorporated into the draft before you, they wanted to update the language concerning ADA access to parks. Previously, the goal had said that future parks need to be designed to be accessible versus making sure that existing parks are also accessible. So that goal, I believe policy 17 has been updated. They also wanted to bolster the language concerning a Parks Commission and establishment of a Parks Department. The Planning Commission basically thinks that, from the discussion anyway, they haven't made a formal recommendation, but they would like to see in the future that a Parks Department be established in the city and that an advisory committee of some sort, whether it's a Parks Commission or committees, be utilized in formulating recommendations concerning city parks. And so that's been incorporated into Goal 13, that's on the back page of the plan. And then finally, the Planning Commission, and this change is not yet reflected in the plan, but they are all recommending that the Bethel South property, which is an undeveloped, it's currently designated as a park, but as our research found late last year, we actually acquired that. It wasn't donated to the city for use as a park, and so they're recommending that that not continue as a park, and then we look for other opportunities for parks in that part of the city, but maybe they're in a more desirable location that's accessible to residential areas, or that one's right across the street from Fred Meyer. So those were the 3 recommendations from the Planning Commission in terms of updating our draft in advance of a public hearing. In general, the draft, the goals and policies really haven't changed, but what we try to do is make a much more concise and succinct parks element. The previous element was quite lengthy and had very detailed descriptions of the existing park facilities, and we just wanted to make it more readable and easier to use. And so that's what we've done, and it's a nice light read. So if there's any questions about this,
How has the language changed? Are these complete additions, or did they modify? You said the ADA was modified.
The ADA was modified. It had read before that new facilities should comply with the ADA, and we added and existing facilities should be retrofitted for increased accessibility where feasible and appropriate. That's
What
the
page
language.
is that on
Page
First to last page, top
410
left.
policy 17.
or 4-10.
And that'll be part of our ADA transition plan. The ADA transition plan is not just streets, it's streets and facilities. So even though I'm disappointed in KRCC's abandonment of that, what was going to be a countywide process, I'm still going to move forward on getting a proposal, have somebody coming over here to look at our streets and facilities, which include all of our parks, and at least get a proposal, and if it exceeds the budget, then either do a budget amendment or I just move it into 2017.
There's companies out there that do this.
Yes.
And as far as changes, the goals and policies really haven't changed from the old plan to the new. Those are mostly the same. Where we've really changed the document is we've updated the introduction, we've documented the public process that's taken place during this most recent update. We've incorporated the park's vision in terms of the connections theme that is throughout the entire draft 2016 comprehensive plan. And then we've just updated the existing conditions, and rather than having a 2-page spread on each park describing what's there, we just created a simple table that says this is the facility, this is the size, this is what's there. Just trying to make it, I guess, less bulky. And then, the city has a standalone parks plan still, and that's where all the details are, but we really wanted to keep the comprehensive plan as clear as possible.
Yeah, the goals and policies really are pretty much the same as before. I've made just a few grammatical corrections to them, and then that addition of that existing facilities ADA language. The goals for establishing a parks commission and a parks department were actually already in there, so didn't take a whole lot of work there.
So what changed with those?
Nothing. They were already in there.
So the only thing that changed was the ADA retrofit of a park then?
Yeah, that was the only change to the goals and policies, other than I think there might have been a grammatical change or two. Just cleaning up typos, making it a little clearer, but that's it. We haven't substantively changed the goals or policies.
I don't see where we have enough work to actually formalize a parks department and create bodies there. But I'm going to advocate in next year's budget to do more of what we're already doing with Etta Turner Park and what we're going to expand on the waterfront. I think this year we're getting a proposal is hiring, just contracting with that. We got guys out there with landscape maintenance companies that their employees have been their wages and benefit package compared to our city employees. They need, it's just apples and oranges, and it's a lot less expensive. Then we have accountability, that the grass is going to get mowed once a week, the leaves are going to get blown, and so on and so forth. So I think eventually we could get there, but in the short run, I think we should be contracting with the private sector to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've got basically one person. We picked up, we're going to have the DeKalb Pier, even what we did the other day, just keeping the railings clean from the seagulls. Once we have the full pier done, we've got the pedestrian pathway, and then we have the McCormick Park. So it's getting to the point where it's getting kind of unmanageable with what we have as far as staffing. And so in the short term, if we looked at just expanding the scope of our current maintenance contract, just for the day-to-day maintenance, we would still do the repairs and things. But I think ultimately, as the city grows, having the conversation about moving to a Parks and Rec department needs to be included.
At some point, the contracts that we have are gonna be more expensive than having our own person. Until that point, I think you hire the private sector.
Should we propose to change this then, instead of creating a Parks Department, to change the language to city should consider enhanced maintenance
Enhanced maintenance.
You know,
and operations or something like that? And I appreciate what they're trying to do, but I just don't know that, like you, we're in a position yet, or should, and I appreciate this is foggy, but
Well, we could
it's still a
definitely do
goal of
number-
creating a department that I don't know that we can justify.
You could definitely do number 42, establish a better commissioner.
42, I don't have a problem with it, I
That's
think it's great, but
easy. You may not need.
creating another department, I think, is
Right.
kind of outside of what this should do.
Yeah, I think as long as it's clear that that the city will, in the future, work towards that.
And it does say
That's
consider
gonna-
creating a department. It
Right.
doesn't say create a
Doesn't
department.
mandate.
so I look through this, and my view is that there's a lot of objectives here. 43? I felt it would be worthwhile to consider language that would say more strongly that the bulk of these things will not get accomplished until we address this somehow, either through additional hiring of staff or the creation of a department. Because essentially, I think that's the reality. We've got so many things here that there's no way they're gonna get done until we have that dedicated manpower.
Yep.
So I'd support additional language that says, you know, we need to take a look at the creation of a department or additional staff or something like that in order to be able to accomplish policy objectives.
Well, I think we can achieve the policy objective by hiring someone to go do the work.
There's a
That's not
lot,
necessarily creating.
No, I mean, we're not gonna get to all of it, but, you know,
I think some of this, you know, is calling out studies and analysis. It's not just physical labor.
Well, I think the other component to this, which will be in the capital facilities element, but our capital facilities plan will be updated for the 2016 as a 6-year or 20-year capital improvement program. And so that'll identify the projects that we're going to do that are also supposed to implement some of these goals. And that's going to, McCormick Village Park is a project over the next 2 years that we're going to work on, and then there will be a third phase of that. But keep in mind that we're collecting impact fees to do some of that work, and so that's going to be, outside consultants, and some of these goals are accomplished through capital projects, not through operations and maintenance.
so there is a funding source, was what you're
Correct.
saying, from these park impact fees that we've gotta spend. If you don't spend them in the window, then
Yeah.
you gotta give them back, and obviously, we've got tasks to do. But Scott's probably got a good point that
I think we need to make it clear to the public that reads this that these are not achievable for the most part until we have dedicated staff.
for funding,
Funding.
additional
Well,
funding.
and when you look at the 2 grants that I'm managing through the RCO and the capital projects that Mark manages for the Parks Department, I mean, essentially we have administrative staff that is carrying out kind of the administrative role of the Parks Department, and so at some point, does it make sense to have that administrative person as opposed to hiring the Parks Department that's actually the crew in the field? Maybe there's an administrative person that manages
Manage
those,
the contractors
the contractors in
and
the future.
contracts.
And that, somebody like Thomas or Zach, either in Public Works or as a standalone employee. But
I think at some point, you're gonna have to move towards a standalone employee that's also pursuing grants, managing the personnel. I mean, it's good.
I just hate to see this driving the creation of something that, when you look at the total picture of the city, isn't really high in the priority.
And I guess I'm
That's
saying the
part
same
of it.
thing, is
Yeah.
it's, what do we do in the interim? But as a future, what would move towards, and that could be 10 years, 20 years,
Yeah,
you
the
know.
plan does look at the 20-year mark, so, I mean, that's not saying that this year we need to create a parks department, but at some point within the next 20 years, we might need
And
to.
the language is there, should consider.
Well, this what we do is just eliminate 43, maybe drop in a 4.8, and just look at, call it, future organization or something, and like I said, addressing this as a 20-year plan to say, as the city grows, as the parks need to grow, it would make sense for us to evaluate the creation of a parks department in the future, just to keep that on the radar, but it's not listed like
Yeah.
an objective we're gonna get right on. It's a whole nother section that says, we're aware that this thing is growing and it might need to stand on its own someday.
And that's why I would have concern over your language in the sense that we're telling the world we can't do this until we create a parks department, which kind of puts more emphasis on
Well-
creating a parks department, so.
Yeah, and I'm not sure Parks Department is the right answer, but,
Don't need it,
but some sort of way to give the attention that it deserves. I think one of the consistent trends I've heard over the years that I've been here in Port Orchard is that there needs to be more attention given to parks. I think we've all heard that. And so maybe the department is not an answer, but some additional staffing or funding for outside
or
services.
this parks commission.
Or Parks Commission. Even that.
Step in the right direction.
That requires staffing though.
That-
That needs
yeah.
one of the
There's some
directors.
heavy lifting in some of these, it really is.
We have taken huge steps in the last few years to address, we're building McCormick Village Park, we're building the pathway, we've done some things to Vanzee, and there's a lot more we can do at
Skate park.
Vanzee and at,
We've invested in a lot of equipment in our parks.
yeah, so I think we're taking some
I
huge
agree.
steps.
I agree.
Uh,
I just
to
don't
make-
want, somebody to take this in isolation and not think about, well, we've got other issues in the city that we
Streets.
have to deal with, and I don't want this one to drive something. We can't expand City Hall if we need, or something of that nature, so.
Clear as mud.
Yeah, I'm not sure I heard a clear recommendation from the committee there, but I heard a lot of
I
ideas.
heard a couple.
Well,
Well, I like Sean's, drop 43 and change them.
And then add a separate section kind
Yeah,
of.
4.8 that just talks about a long-term vision, right? Just, maybe that's what it's called, long-term vision.
Yeah.
And it just, that's the other thing, with the impact fees,
Long-term vision could be a parks division, a parks,
Commission, Parks District.
park
Parks-
district, that's what word I was looking for, with the county. With a dedicated funding source that pays for the staff and the resources.
Because you have to look at funding. It's great we have all these impact fees and we can do capital projects, but then what do we do with it? How do we maintain it? How do we operate it? How do we keep it going? And, so we need to grow carefully and make sure we have the funding stream to maintain these parks like we all want them maintained.
Yeah, that's one of my buttons is, we build these nice things, we gotta keep them nice.
Right.
And in the short run, I think it's hiring landscape contractors, that's what they do for a living versus our guys that should be out fixing streets and water lines.
So I think what I heard, at least from two committee members, is you'd recommend striking policy 43 and then adding a section concerning a
4.8.
long-term vision. Okay?
Okay.
so, I wasn't sure what my role was when I got this, but I went through this and, have got a lot of comments.
Okay.
I think if you have like just edits, typically you would work directly with the department on those. It wouldn't have to be vetted through the committee necessarily, right? Depending on what they are. Are they
Yeah, if
substantive?
it's substantive, I think we can discuss it.
Well, one of the things I think that we ought to at least touch on here, and I think it belongs in another chapter as well, is that we don't have adequate right-of-way for safe, non-motorized passage. So widened shoulders, for example. And we talked about linking centers to centers.
That's in the non-motorized element of the transportation plan.
Okay.
So that's addressed elsewhere.
It might be worthwhile to at least touch on it. And I've got a couple areas identified if you wanted to do that. And then I had comments on goals and policies as well. And I don't know how you want to go through those.
That seems like that could be substantive enough to need some input from.
Yeah.
Well, why don't I do this? Why don't I sit with Nick and then we can weed through these and see which ones are or are not?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. And you're looking for the planning commission hearing when?
Well, the planning commission is going to make their recommendation hopefully on March,
First Tuesday.
yeah, the first Tuesday of March, which I believe is the 1st. So anytime between now and March 1st, I'm happy to provide the committee's feedback to the Planning Commission as they consider making a recommendation. And
But this will be this is the document, this draft is what they have in
Yes.
front of them.
yeah, so they would have to make recommendations on this draft and potentially with certain amendments. And but at the same time, the city council can insert the amendments no matter what the Planning Commission does at a later date as well. But ideally, we would have as complete a document as possible when the city council finally takes this up.
You know, an interesting thing, I was sitting here thinking, in that one particular vacation we talked about a minute ago down along Port Orchard Boulevard, do we ever look at these potential vacations in light of our parks needs? And I appreciate we're not gonna build a pocket park down there, but there is potentially some benefit of just green space.
We basically, I mean, the vacations speak specifically to like existing use like utilities or some future need. And so we
But
do
is
take that.
parks part of a potential future need?
I think there's an underlying ownership in a right-of-way of the adjacent property owners, and so it really depends if it's unopened versus opened, and
Well, I appreciate there's legal issues,
So if you
but
get-
I'm just
yeah.
asking that when something comes forward, that at least that's a consideration.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm thinking of like Seattle has all these green spaces. 'Cause I've been on some of these crews that go in and remove the ivy from these green spaces. And so that's what you're talking about, is if you have some of these unopened right-of-ways that then actually become a greenway or a green space.
Well, use the boulevard as an example. Having the greenery along both sides of the boulevard is part of the character of that street. And, you know, for us to give up a portion of it, you know, you'd have a checkerboard of, I don't know what they could develop there, but
Well, and I think that's the issue, is that is platted, if you go back to the original plat, and how that road was just built down the middle of a stream in the late
Mark, I
60s.
only use the boulevard as an example.
Well, no,
My
but-
point is that whenever vacation, be it the one on Bethel or whatever, and I don't want to belabor this thing, I just think
Well-
that it's probably not a bad idea, is when you look
Like I
at
said-
the future need of the city, that not only is it streets, utilities, own parks,
On the
that's all.
waterfront, I believe it is addressed. Kitsap County has a water trail alliance that does inventory all of the right-of-way ends at the water as kind of maybe kayak rest points or different things.
They actually go a little further. For any right-of-way vacation, they'll ask if the area being vacated, proposed for vacation, is a part of any sort of greenway or trails plan, and those boxes gotta be checked before.
Yeah, that's
before-
all
I think
I'm
that's what
suggesting,
you're
is
at,
just
right?
check a box, that it was considered, that's all.
Right, no, we do look at that in that. I guess most of these areas that are undeveloped, privately owned
Are not
parcels or
identified.
unopened right of way aren't built, they're in critical areas. Like Port Orchard Boulevard, that whole slope is pretty much in a critical area, so it's not buildable, and it's, you know, somebody's paying the taxes on that. You know, the city could go through if they wanted to create, for example, like Port Orchard Boulevard Greenway, they would go through and actually pick those up. But you do have people that are paying taxes on those parcels, but they're really, and we've
From time to
had,
time, I get, you know, upset people that own property along there that want to develop it, and, you know, and maybe we need to go
Yeah.
along and start buying, if we want to maintain it as green spaces, and we're not gonna allow them to develop it, we probably should be buying it then.
yeah, we have a number of people that will come in and they'll ask about water and sewer, and they want to build a house on a very small lot, and then they turn out it's not feasible or it's in a critical area. You know, so there's a lot of those areas, and we touched on it on the last, more on the Blackjack Creek side, some of those, you know, green spaces, and now with the FEMA expansions, I guess. So there are a lot of properties in the city that could be turned into open space greenways.
I think the important thing is that the council has discretion, provided that the right-of-way wasn't platted prior to incorporation of the city and prior to the changes in laws of Washington in like 1905 or 1909.
All I asked was just when a vacation comes forward, you check a block that we thought about it and how it would fit into our park plan.
It's not a bad idea. Make it part of the process.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, I've got about 11 minutes and I have to leave, so I don't know if there's,
So Rob, you had related to the parks plan,
I
the
just-
Paul Bowers.
Just following up on this, one of my thoughts was we should be that Bethel Park South property, which Planning Commission is recommending removing. I see Paul Powers also as a park that is underutilized. It isn't, there is no pedestrianation of that neighborhood. I think we should remove it from the park plan for a period of time. I'd hang on to the property and quit putting, trying to find ways to put resources into it until we build, sidewalks and pedestrian improvements out in that area. I'd rather see that money put into our currently functional parks and making them much better and more usable than putting resources into a park that's not getting used. So I mentioned the idea of Carolyn. She didn't seem bothered by it. I would like to find another way, if we remove this from the parks plan, to recognize Carolyn and Paul Powers in a more appropriate way.
And I would like the facility as a public works shed, because we know we've ran into the issue of when we had that freeze condition that had the 304 super elevation and the traffic was backed up to Mullinex. We couldn't get back to the shop from the east side for sand, and the interchange was blocked. So that used to be the fire station. The Public Works had it for years. When Fred was here, we reduced our Public Works footprint considerably and put improvements to make it a park, but quite honestly, we improved the park, but nobody came. So I would like to advocate, as we move forward, if we take it out of the plan, that we really look at that as being our Public Works shed east, and then our existing facility with Public Works shed west. It seems like the logical use of that property. It's got a big flat area. We could fence it, start putting, structures on and splitting our equipment, because people are amazed when they look inside that fire station. They think it's empty, and it's crammed packed with all more parks type vehicles. And so I'm thinking as we continue to grow, we're going to need a facility on the east side of the freeway, the highway.
That's secondary to,
Yeah.
we're putting
Right.
resources into an underutilized park that probably should be in our parks plan.
So would this committee like to make a recommendation to that effect?
well, do we know how well it's being utilized? I know there was a lot of interest from soccer groups and,
I think, well, they put in lights at Van Z for soccer practices because they weren't available at Paul Powers, and so I don't think it's being used by any sports teams now, except maybe
No.
informally. I think the important thing is that our survey included some results on that, and Elle, you probably remember the results better than
I
I
did
do.
not bring them with me, but in all of the questions on whether we should maintain the Bethel South property, Paul Powers, the Lundberg property, all of them, we did receive a majority of respondents saying they would like to see those as parks. But the parks survey might have some bias in that it's only a small number of citizens of Port Orchard who voluntarily filled out a parks survey. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily representative of the entire community's feeling, but they did.
They're gonna want parks
They want the parks
regardless.
everywhere.
I'm not advocating for Mark's position at this point. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
let's not put resources into this park at this time. Let's put those resources somewhere else. And somewhere down the road, we need to look at his needs, and whether that's a Parks Department shed or, it does become a park because we've got sidewalks in the area, then it makes sense, because people can get to it. There's just no improvements there.
Well,
Well,
our
we
soccer
found
teams now, I think are gonna use the new high school field too, just because
Yeah.
it's playable year round, it's lit, that's awesome.
well, what we
Yeah, that's
heard,
great
when we
to see.
talked about it, is you never have enough practice fields.
What we found out on that field is when South Kitsap Pee Wees looked at taking it, they were gonna have to fill and create the field, and then we had the parking issue and the lights issue in that neighborhood. When the soccer Hain,
Joanne?
Joe I. Hain, he looked at it, it didn't meet his need, and that's why they went to Van Zee. So the biggest issue in making the park improvements was really the parking, and we even looked at trying to do some parking down at the church, some sort of shared use agreement, so that was really the issue of, because remember last year, the year before, we were gonna do a large $300,000 park improvement, and that kind of came up to this.
But the challenge too is if you create the parking over here at church up the street, there's no sidewalks, you have traffic on this road, and there's no sidewalks to get to use that park.
Right.
It's just, it's not a
Is there any value
function.
to that property, selling it and using the funds to buy another piece of property somewhere?
Before I would do that, I would do his plan, is we need it actually for the Public Works Department, but
Do we need it there,
I believe so.
Yeah, that would be a perfect location.
not something on Bethel further to the east?
You know, it's just a good location, it's direct right onto Tremont there, so, I mean, it would be a good location if we went down to that Bethel West property, then we're by the Bethel tank. The problem with that one is it's very steep, so you're not gonna get a lot on the property, it's a long skinny strip.
Well, my point is it ideal because we have it, or is it ideal because it's located where you need
You
it?
gotta
I'd say
buy
both.
Something
Okay,
else.
well, if it's where you need it, then fine.
Yeah, I'd say it serves both, we have it, we've already got facilities there, there's
Okay.
water.
So we're gonna suspend any further investment in that.
So that's the recommendation, is to remove Paul Powers from the park plan without identifying a new use for it this time.
That's what I'm advocating for.
Okay. All right, and Councilmember Clausen, since you only have a few minutes, would you rather discuss the McCormick scope of work or?
Your call, whatever
I
you
don't think
need
there's-
first.
Yeah, let's do McCormick's scope, because I don't need to be.
Yeah, so we did receive the scope of work for the McCormick Park contract. It came in a little bit higher than what we had budgeted for the year. We had $125,000 in the budget. The estimate came in at $151,500. The big reason for that is that we realized we were not going to be able to reuse the old environmental documents. The wetland reports were from 2006. The standards for evaluation have changed, so they're bringing on a sub to update the wetlands documents, and that's adding to the cost. In the grand scheme of things, we have park impact fee dollars that are paying for our match on the grant, and if you remember, the grant was about $385,000, which was half of the total project cost, and we had to come up with the other half. Parks impact fee money is coming in strong with the level of single-family construction, so I think we're going to be able to make this up. Even if we exceed the total project cost because of this contract, we've got the money coming in for the development of that park.
Or get it done.
So my goal, we have nearly come to terms with the consultant. They've requested a number of changes to the contract concerning indemnification language and a couple of other terms, and so the attorney's been working with them to hammer out a contract, and my goal is to have that done today, to put onto the council agenda for next Tuesday for approval. And so if everything goes well and they're willing to sign the contract, you'll have a contract to approve.
Have them cross off the word, so that's it.
So does this committee recommend the scope then?
I just, but if you're, yeah.
Okay, great.
And just before you take off, for next month's agenda, I would like to add an agenda item and a discussion of property tax abatement as a development tool. Targeted.
And I don't know, so we have the other items. We had some code updates that we put on the agenda. We recently had a conditional use permit application come in, and it just reminded us of how deficient our existing code was in that area. I included the previous code document, which was chapter 1635. And if you remember last July, we presented an outline of the proposed code updates that we wanted to complete. Our code identifies conditional use permits, variances, non-conforming uses, and zones. Those are all in the existing code. The code sections are very short, somewhat incomplete. They don't provide a lot of guidance to staff in terms of how we're supposed to process these applications. And so I think the the draft codes that we've prepared really improve on that. There's still a couple of details that need to be worked out. But what I'd like to ask the committee is, in terms of a process of moving this forward, my intention would be to take this to the planning commission